It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. This week's episode is so much to take in. So, without any further ado, we gotta discuss all the spoilers of What If Episode 4. The Watcher takes us into a universe where Stephen Strange does not lose his hands, but his heart. Where on the night of his car crash, he's accompanied by Christine Palmer. Instead of him being injured, she perishes right next to him. And over the next few years, he's become obsessed over saving her life at any cost. Before I start properly with my review, I want to know your thoughts on What If, not only on this episode, but so far. Throw it all down there in the comments below. Start the conversation, and I'll join you soon enough as we discuss our thoughts on this show. Also, as always, this review will have spoilers, so do watch the episode before watching this review, or if you just don't care about spoilers, you're more than welcome. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If this is the first time you're clicking on a review from me, consider clicking that subscribe button, because it does wonders to get the content out there, and you'll always have What If reviews on Wednesday and more wonderful film content. This week's What If does the best when it comes to fulfilling the premise of a show like What If. By far, it has the highest stakes. By far, it goes the wildest with its premise and on the grand scope of the show and how it possibly connects to the MCU. We have a few more answers, especially because we were all waiting for this episode to maybe give us some insight into Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So I really like how the first third of this episode is pretty much a montage of the events of the film Doctor Strange. We see that he goes to Kamar-Taj after his heart is broken, seeking guidance. We see him training in the mystical arts. We see him fighting Dormammu, and we're done with that very quickly so we can proceed through this episode and everything is brand new. So on the second anniversary of Christine's death, Doctor Strange is taken to a breaking point against the advice of Wong, who is also here in this episode in small doses, but nevertheless the voice of reason that Stephen Strange desperately needs. But of course, he doesn't listen to him. He goes back in time trying to save Christine over and over and over again. And soon enough, the Ancient One, a sort of echo of her essence, comes to deliver some guidance as well to Stephen Strange, as Christine's death is a point fixed in time. It cannot be changed, otherwise it also creates a paradox. If Christine doesn't die, Doctor Strange doesn't need to go to Kamar-Taj, and in this universe, that's how things must play out. And over all these events, we have the Watcher lingering in the back, watching, narrating. And this is the first episode where we have more involvement from the Watcher. So against the Ancient One's advice, Doctor Strange travels back in time to the library of Cagliostro to find his lost books, and he's met by a very kind man who at first I thought would be maybe a Mordo, maybe an ancestor of Mordo, but no, it's just a very ancient wizard that thinks Doctor Strange is called the Sorcerer Armani because he's wearing the Armani suit, and the guy thinks that's odd, obviously, and he takes him into this beautiful, never seen before location that I found was so intricate, so filled with detail, and so interesting for what was going to happen. And it seems as Strange finds the book that he needs to mess with time, and he starts messing with time, he transports ancient and mythical creatures from a portal to his location, and it seems like we have our second cameo of Shuma-Gorath, or our first. I don't know. The one in the first episode was never confirmed. This one is never confirmed to be Shuma-Gorath. But it's the second time we see a big tentacle monster, and it does look like they're the same color, the same size. It does look like it's the same one from episode 1, or maybe it's an ancestor of that fucking monster. And Doctor Strange sees this creature is too powerful, so he starts very small, and he starts opening portals for different creatures, small, big, medium size, and he starts absorbing them to keep their power. At one point, it looks like he absorbs one of Odin's ravens into himself, which is thus spectacular, and knowing Odin's ravens, that is tremendous power in that creature alone. But every time he absorbs one, we start seeing him quickly shift into looking like a humanoid version of those creatures. And I'm sure there are many other creatures there that I did not recognize, so I trust that you all will let me know some of them in the comments below. One of them looks like a man-bat, and it could be a version of Morbius. And they could do that since they don't refer to it by name or anything. Just a thought. And eventually Strange is so tired because he stopped himself in time so he could do this over centuries. And we have the Watcher in the back. And at one point Strange notices his presence. He doesn't know who's there. He doesn't actually see the Watcher, but he senses someone, which I found very interesting. It was our first droplet of insight into, can anyone feel, see, sense the Watcher's presence as he looks into these universes? And I think Omega level or Nexus level beings can sense him. I don't think Strange is the only one. I don't think throughout this show he will be the only one. If we get some insight back in Multiverse of Madness next year, I think Wanda can see the Watcher. And I think it's very interesting that they already dropped this into our minds, that it is at least possible to see and sense the Watcher. And so eventually Strange does absorb the tentacle creature. Let's just call him Shumagorath for the sake of argument, even if he doesn't end up being, just so I can call him something, so I can call that creature by its name. Shumagorath, he absorbs Shumagorath, or Shumagorath by proxy, I guess, and he finds out what I just said about him trapping himself in centuries, and Oben, and I believe that's how we pronounce it, he wants to die. Death is part of the plan, and that's exactly what Strange is not doing. And he's putting the universe itself at stake. The fabric of reality in this timeline is deteriorating, and soon enough we find out that Strange going back in time has created two alternates of Doctor Strange. One that ended up doing this decision and going to the library of Cagliostro, and one that didn't and heard the voice of reason of Wong, and as he steps outside, the world is going away. It's melting into this kind of black goo that has these outside glowing golden lights that are the result of magic. I think that's a really good visual indicator of what is happening, why it's happening. That's why the episode doesn't waste too much time explaining it, how we come to this point, but soon enough we have the return of the Echo of the Ancient One, and she drops all of this knowledge on Doctor Strange, how there's two of them, and Wong himself is melting away, but Strange is pulled into a portal and into the library of Cagliostro, and he meets Doctor Strange Supreme. He's right here. This guy. He meets this guy right here. Doctor Strange Supreme. And something that I really like is that Doctor Strange Supreme is doing something very evil, something that should not be done. The episode does a great job at showing why this is a really bad thing. It's not gonna work out well. But at the same time, it keeps showing us that he still has that heart, that goodness inside Stephen Strange that we know exists is still there somewhat. It's very buried, it's very dormant, but it exists, and I think that's a really nice, very important detail. So Supreme takes Doctor Strange back to the point where Christine dies, and he wants his power, the two of them, to save her, which ensues in a fabulous action sequence. The fucking cloaks are fighting against one another at one point. That's just fucking awesome. Not to mention that it is visually interesting, the location is interesting, the animation is top-notch, and both of them use very different sets of powers. They're not just using the same kind of magic tricks or spells against one another. Supreme has got a whole arsenal of creatures inside him, and he uses it to its full advantage, and I think they did the best they could in this episode to to make that fight scene as unpredictable, as different from one character to the other as it could, and I think it stands out very, very well. And there is a moment of heartbreak here, because the cloak from Doctor Strange tries to trap Supreme in his arms, and Supreme burns the cloak. So in this universe, the cloak has died. I have no shame in admitting I shed a tear for the cloak. I will miss the cloak. I love the cloak. And things only get worse from there, because Supreme does defeat Doctor Strange. He's able to absorb him, and he's able to return Christine to life. But by then, it's too late. That very point in time where they are standing at is deteriorating, just like everyone else, just like everything else in this timeline, and Doctor Strange turned into a big mishmash of a creature, which I really didn't see the point of. He quickly, by choice, turns back into Doctor Strange Supreme, so I really didn't need him to be a monster. We get that he became a monster, he became obsessed. By the time it's already too little too late, Supreme regrets his actions. He pleads to the Watcher. He talks to the Watcher directly. He sees him. He begs him to save the world, to let him pay for his sins, not Christine, not the world. But the Watcher can't. The Watcher still won't interfere, and so Doctor Strange Supreme creates this kind of prism bubble that protects, supposedly, him and Christine, but Christine is erased from existence all the same. That's how the episode ends. We end on this tragic, melancholic note about how the choices of a man who had almost everything lost it all for love. I think it's a beautifully tragic note to end on, and the episode sticks to that tone, sticks to those consequences and the stakes that it set up from the beginning. And I fucking love it. With having the highest stakes, the Doctor Strange Supreme episode also showed us that it had the highest consequences. And so we leave this episode, we leave this story by seeing that the world is destroyed. This timeline, by all we know, does not exist anymore. Now, we don't see him dying. We don't see him disappearing and melting away, which I think it's a very deliberate choice. And I think this isn't the last we will see of Doctor Strange Supreme. In fact, I think we might have already seen him in Spider-Man Far From Home, because that Doctor Strange is someone who is very much not afraid of tampering with time very nonchalantly. What If Episode 4 is probably my favorite of the show thus far. It's very much up there along with the T'Challa Star-Lord episode. It does the best with its premise, it goes the wildest, it actually gives us some insight into the Watcher's involvement, maybe future involvement in this show, and also some insight into what could be going on that affects the entire multiverse and our live action movies for the first time. It's also at its core a really tragic love story between Doctor Strange and Christine. This episode does a great job at making you care about their relationship. And of course, we're lucky to have the insight of the No Way Home trailer, but in that trailer, Doctor Strange says that the multiverse is a concept of which we know frighteningly little about. This episode is the proof of that. It's just a quote when you see it in the trailer. It's probably just a quote when you see it in the movie. This episode is actually the proof of that and how frightening, how dangerous it is. I think it's a wonderful episode of television, and I think it shows how good this show in general can be, even if it's not always this good. I'm giving Marvel's What If Episode 4 Doctor Strange Supreme an A. And so those are my thoughts on this week's What If. Let me know your thoughts about it down in the comments below. Did you love it even more than me? Did you not like it as much as me? Throw it all down there and start the conversation. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, if you still haven't subscribed or you are still watching, consider clicking that button, because if you are still watching, you enjoy it on some level. Thank you so much once more. You are the best. Check out my reviews for previous What If episodes, and I'll be back very soon with more reviews. I also have my review, non-spoilers, for Shang-Chi already up, and I'm going to watch it again this Friday, and I hope to see you on that review as well. And so until the next one, love each other, and love the movies.